Welcome back to day 4 of the Fab Click Fabrics Sew Along using the Ellie and Mac Summer Romper that we are almost done with. Almost. Today is actually the last day of sewing it, unless you have a few steps to make up on, which is understandable. So for my portion, since I'm doing the romper, I'm going to be attaching the bodice to the pants, and we're going to put the elastic through, and that's it. Once you put that elastic through, close it up, we're done. So what we're going to do is take your pants. Oh, there's the opening. You're going to take your pants and turn it right sides out. And we're going to take the bodice and turn it wrong sides out. Now, you remember when we did our bodice a few days ago, I told you to put that clip at the bottom so you know which is your front and which is your back. My clip is still there because this is where it matters. We're going to put our bodice and our pant together. So you have your center front, side seams, and center back of your pant. And you're going to match up those 4 places first. I take my pin that I had on my bodice. I know that this is the back of my bodice, and I definitely know this is the back of my pant. Pin there. You're going to pin on the side seams. And this is another good reason when you press your seams, if you press things to the back, press your seams to the back, it will help you in making sure, okay, this is the back. Yes, this is the back. And we're going to stick, well, not really stick, but we're going to put all of the bodice, we're going to put all of the pants inside of our bodice. Which I think, yes. I don't think my pants were in the bodice like they were supposed to be. So it'll look similar to this. Your bodice is on the outside, your pants are inside of that. Now, I already had pins to let me know where my center back and center front was on my bodice. In the event you don't, just match up your side seam. And then, voila, there's center. My side seam is here. Where the fold naturally happens is where your center front and center back are. On your pant, it's kind of a given because it's where your seams are. Now, this should also be a 1-to-1 ratio. You shouldn't have to stretch either. You shouldn't have to stretch either piece. The bodice and pant should have a 1-to-1 ratio of being together. Just make sure all those raw edges are even. So when you match the raw edges, it should come together on a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay. Oh, it'll help if I pin my side seam. So if you start at those 4 places, center front, center back, and side seams, and then you just kind of fill in the rest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to serge this edge. You definitely, same as before, you don't have to. You want to finish this particular edge. So however you have been finishing your seams throughout your garment, whether you've been using pinking shears, whether you've been using an overcast stitch on your sewing machine, or if you've just been leaving it raw. You want to go ahead and finish this edge, because what we're making here is the casing for our elastic. So the pattern calls for a 1/2 inch elastic. For me, I don't use 1/2 inch seam elastic when it goes across my body. I just don't feel, for me, again, 1/2 inch seam allowance just isn't substantial enough for me and my body type. Since our casing is going to be 1 inch wide, I'm going to use a 3/4 inch. I'm going to use 3/4 inch elastic. And that still gives room in my casing without it twisting and turning. And because, you know, if you try and put too big of elastic inside of a casing, it kind of bubbles up on both ends because it's trying to accommodate it. 1/4 inch is fine, especially since this is a knit garment. So I'm going to use 3/4 inch elastic in my casing, but definitely feel free to use the 1/2 inch if that's what you have on hand, or if that's your preference. I always keep 3/4 inch because that just 3/4 inch or higher, because it just works better for my body type, but I'm still able to use the pattern as drafted even with that 3/4 inch. Okay, so I have all that clipped together. And remember, if you're ever in doubt if everything is going to be right after you sew it, I got my pins in, just go ahead and flip it out. Flip it out and you see we're good. This is, everything is lining up. We got my pockets on the front, pocket on the front. So we're doing good. My side seams are matched up. Then we'll flip it back to how it's supposed to be. Flip the bodice back wrong sides out. And now we'll sew. Now again, that's just something I do because I don't think anyone actually likes to seam rip any type of threads or seam rip their garments, but I really do hate it with a passion. So if there's anything I can do to try and prevent it, I will. And this is just one of the things that I started doing to help me is I will pin it, I'll flip it, you know, how it's supposed to be, right sides out, kind of give it a quick double check, make sure everything is good to go, just so I don't have to seam rip anything. I mean, because mistakes are going to happen. All right, so now that we have that all together, I know where the back of my pattern is. So for me, whenever I serge, I just go, I start at the back. And clipping will also make sure all of your seams are going the right way, so there's no additional bumps from seams going different ways. So we're just going to serge this, or finish your edge however you've been finishing your seams so far. Shoot, wrong container. Now, one thing that you could do to prevent some of the extra I'm needing to do is if you are able to sew in the round on your sewing machine or your serger, which basically is this piece or a similar piece that you can take out, so you have a circle that you can sew, that you can put your garment to sew in the circle. I don't usually use it. No particular reason, but it's definitely probably, well, I won't say definitely, it's maybe easier than having all of this going on, but I'm so used to it. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. All right. So we just finished the raw edges of what will be our casing. Now what we're going to do is take it to your table, or you can do it, you know, wherever you need to. I'm going to take mine to my ironing board. Well, the table where my ironing board is. And I'm going to mark 1 inch from our finished edge. So we have our finished edge here. You're going to mark 1 inch up from that. And essentially you're going to draw a line that you're going to follow on your sewing machine. I'm fairly confident to say this cannot be done on a serger, but I don't even know all the things my serger can do, but I'm pretty sure you can do it. So you'll take it to the actual sewing machine, and you're going to mark 1 inch up from that finished edge that we just completed, and we're going to stitch on that line to create the casing. All right, to the table. So here we have my romper. My bodice still right sides out. My pant is right sides out. Did I say that right? My bodice is wrong sides out. My pants are still right sides out. Okay. And I did a quick press on my the finishing raw edge we just did. Now what we're going to do is draw a line 1 inch from our raw edge that we just finished. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Okay. So what I do is I just go a little bit at a time, and I use one of these quilting rulers because they're really great for having the see-through. And what I'll do is I'll actually mark my fabric at 1 inch and a quarter. And the reason I do that is because we just did our finishing edge right here. That's 1/4 inch that we finished. So if I set the very edge to 1 1/4, I'm already gonna make sure my line is up at 1 inch. I hope that makes sense. So if the edge of my fabric is right here at 1 1/4, I can see that that finishing edge that I finished stops at 1 inch, and then 1 inch to where I'm a mark is gonna be my 1 inch for my elastic. Now there's also a couple of other ways you can do this. You can also just go straight to your sewing machine and figure out where 1 inch would put your needle, and just keep an eye on that line and keep your fabric lined up on that line, and then just sew that way. Again, my fabric act like it don't want to listen, and it's not this fabric, it's any fabric. I just like to tell my fabric what it's gonna do. So this works for me. Do what works for you. Now I don't do a whole entire line because that would take a little bit too long. I just do enough to where I can kind of connect the dots. And of course, because my ruler is see-through, I'm just really able to kind of spot it, line it up, and keep going. And you only have to do this on one side. I find it's easier to do it on the side with the bodice. So as you can see, I hope my head's not in the way. I got a big old head. I'm just moving my fabric so that the end here matches up with that 1 1/4. Oh, I didn't do as good of a job pressing like I thought I did. So I will keep going around. I probably should have did this in another color than gray, but it's all right. Because I don't think it's going to show up on camera very well. Let's see. I don't know if y'all can see this line here. Hope so. So that was the front. And I'm already on the back. If I can remember my place. Up here. So the biggest thing with doing it this way is just making sure all of your fabric is smooth. So you don't accidentally mark the wrong thing. Now another way to mark this would be, I'm using a chalk roller. You can also use, I have some Frixion pins, but with this being black, primarily black garment, I find the chalk roller shows up a lot better. Probably not the gray one. The gray probably wasn't the best choice. But I have other colors. I just didn't grab them. Then you got to use what you got. You can also use Crayola washable markers. I use those as well, especially if I'm doing any type of garment where I'm going to have to press it back to where I started. And then I'll just make sure these lines connect. All right. So it's maybe a little rough to see, but I have a line right here, goes here, that we're going to sew directly onto that line. Okay, so we're back at our sewing machine, and we're going to stitch directly on that line that we created for our casing. I'm gonna get myself some extra white since I used gray instead of a color I can actually see. Like, I ain't wearing glasses. Alright, now where you start it is totally up to you. I'm going to start mine in the center back because we are going to leave a 2-inch opening in order for us to thread our elastic through. So you have your center back seam. Just start on one side of it. And let me actually use my in the round. Now, like I was saying over at the table, you can, if you don't want to mark, you can see where, you can look on your sewing machine and measure to see where that 1 inch amount would be on your sewing machine, and you can just use that as a guide. So for instance, same thing, we know that our finished edge is 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to do a 1 inch. So if you look here on the sewing machine, if I put my needle down right now, you can use your seam gauge to say, okay, I'm going to put my needle here, start that at 0, and I'm going to go out 1 1/4 of an inch. Where does that land me? So on my machine, it lands me at this line right here. And if I just didn't want to do all the marking, I could just come to the machine and say, this is where it lands me. I'm just going to sew in the round with my fabric edge on that line. And essentially you'd be doing the same thing. And you wouldn't have to worry about trying to see gray on black. So that's what I'm going to do. So in addition to my gray line, I'm also going to match that fabric edge. Because that gray line is a little bit hard to see. Now, if your machine has different seam gauges, so maybe yours doesn't go exactly to a line, you can do a few things. You can always get one of these magnetic seam gauges where you just pop it down and you line your fabric against that. Or what I did before I had one of those was I just got a magnet off of my refrigerator that had a straight edge, and I just used that. Everybody be giving out magnets for all types of things, so I just used that as the straight edge to help me. Now I'm coming up to my pocket, so you want to make sure everything is laying flat because we don't want to create extra bulk within that pocket. Got my second pocket here. Making sure everything is nice and flat. Now what I'm going to do real quick, because I know that I'm coming up to the end of the front of my garment, I'm going to take a quick second to place a pin or something where I started, because you don't want to accidentally sew close your casing. This is one of the few times, like, if I know for me, because I don't use pins, if I see a pin, it's because I'm trying to bring my attention to something. And, you know, sometimes when you're sewing, you lose track of time. You just, you know, you're in the zone and you may not realize what you need to do or what you're about to do. So, I do that to say, hey, Queenora, stop, take a minute, think about what you're doing. There's a reason this pin is here. Which in this case is going to signal me to stop sewing. I just make whatever adjustments I need, go slow. You really want there not to be any extra bulging or extra fabric. Everything is nice and flat, because when we put this elastic through, it's going to bunch the fabric up. It's going to bring it together to cinch in the ways to bring it in to your actual measurement. So you don't want any additional fabric in there. So I just crossed over my back center seam. So I have this opening, and it's probably more than 2 inches, but it's okay. So you see, we're good. And actually, I lied. We're going to close that all the way up. Where'd I leave that? This is not the part where we leave it open. So, don't listen to me, friends. Close that all the way up. Go on and close it up, close it up. All right. It's the next stitching we do that we are going to close it all the way up. So we are going to, for me, I like turning it all the way to the wrong side. We're going to push this casing that we just made. I want to say we're going to push it down. Let me make sure. Oh, we're going to push it up. Okay. This is why you read your instructions. We're going to push that casing up, and we're going to stitch this to the bodice. And this is where you leave your 2-inch elastic opening. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start at my center back. This is my center back. I'm going to put a pin essentially in the same spot that it was just in a few moments ago. And we're going to stitch this down. And we're going to do it right against that finished edge that we created. So bring this all in. Here's my pin. I'm going to start on the other side of it. And we're going to do the same exact thing we've been doing this whole time. Put our presser foot down, making sure everything is laying flat with soft hands. Let me see where that's going to put me. So you want to stitch inside, or I'm going to stitch inside of that 1/4 of an inch, using that as my guide for stitching this down. Now remember, you don't want to stretch your fabric, but you want to make sure everything is in line and in place. So definitely go slow, because you want to make sure there's room for your elastic, especially if you're going to be like me, using a bigger elastic than what the pattern calls for. So I'm just going slow, taking my time to make sure it's laying flat, because we definitely don't want any extraness. And we're going to do the same thing as normal. Make sure our side seams are lined up. So before you stitch, I'm making sure everything is laying flat. I don't have any bunchiness, because that's what we don't want. Now I should use my Jig to help get over this bulky seam, but I kind of lost it. So let's see if we can get over it the old-fashioned way and not poke my finger. Yay. So we're just going through this, making sure everything is lined up and flat. Okay, so I just got to where my pin is. I'm going to back stitch, take my pin out, bring my garment out, and we have our casing. So you have that opening. This is where we're going to insert our casing. So like I said, I'm going to use 3/4 of an inch elastic. I know I will have room, since I also stitched inside of that finished edge. So I may have like 1 1/8 room for 1 1/8 inch of room within my casing, which will be plenty for 3 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go get my elastic. We're going to thread it through, and I'm going to get my safety pin, because that's how I thread my elastic through. That's all I got. Uh-oh. Okay, so you have your elastic, whether you're going to do 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. Always with your elastic, I think that's called exercise it. I don't know the official words for it, but make sure you stretch it out ahead of time. That way it's good for you to put around your body and in your garment. So the best way to get your measurement that you're going to need for your elastic is to use your body. So you're going to do, I'm a little teapot. It may not be the smallest part of your waist. Let's see. It may, oh, Jesus. It may not be the smallest part of your waist. For me, it is. You can see the little divot right there. Or you could do, I'm a little teapot, and see where you bend from side to side. And you're just going to put that elastic around, and you're just going to make it nice and comfy, where it's not stretching, it's not pulling, it's not too tight. I make it real comfortable, and I mark that spot because from this spot we're going to actually bring it in just a little bit more to secure the elastic. So I take it at a very relaxed state, not too tight, not too loose, so that way, you know, when I go to eat, I got room. You know, if I get some more COVID weight, I got some room. But also, it's not running into me. You want to be comfortable in the clothes that you make. So I do it just based off of comfort, not stretching it at all, because I'm going to stretch it when I go to cross it over. So this is where my elastic starts. This is where I'm going to cut from, because once I overlap it, then I'm actually stretching the elastic, and now it's kind of like a little bit, not like tight, but it's there and I can feel it. So if I just go ahead and start at a comfort state, then I know even when it goes to a stretch state, I'm still comfortable. Does that make sense? So we're going to mark that, or cut it in my case. I don't need to mark it. Okay. We are going to get our safety pin, which is in my pocket. All right. Loop it, or, you know, stick it through. You can also apply some tape to the head part of your safety pin so that way it doesn't come undone. I don't normally do that anymore. I've gotten a little used to doing it this way. Or what you can also do is turn it the other way, that you lead with the back side of the needle, not needle, the back side of the sewing pin, because that's usually where it comes undone, is from all of the maneuvering that you have to do, and most of it is done with whatever is leading your elastic through. So if you do it this way, you don't have to worry about it either. So let's go ahead and thread this through. Okay, so we have our elastic. We're going to find the opening at the center back that we have, and we are just going to thread it through. What I also do to make sure my elastic doesn't get twisted is I will go down the length of my elastic so I know it's all straight, and I will pin it to the opening that way. So this all stays straight. So I know if when my elastic comes out, it has to match up this way. That's just in case your elastic turns and twists. And we'll do a few bar tacks to make sure it doesn't move on us. Now, in feeding my elastic through, because I did 1 1/8 since I stitched it within my seam allowance, this 3/4 of an inch elastic is just gliding right through. I would even guess to say you could probably make a 1 inch elastic work if that's what you already have. You got to use what you have. So if you have a 1 inch elastic, just do like I did, sew inside of your 1/4 of an inch allowance to give you that extra wiggle room. Or if, let's say you only have 1/4 of an inch elastic or 3/8 of an inch elastic, you can always create multiple rows within your casing. So then you just do an extra line of gathers, which now that I say that out loud, I think I want to try that. So we'll see if I have enough time to do that and create one like that. All right. I mean, you can see how I'm just going through, no issues, no pulling at all with my elastic. All right. So as you can see, it's starting to turn up. So that's one of the good reasons why I keep this here, because it actually has turned somewhere. So that'll be something that I will work on when I come back around. We are out. We're going to pin these two together. And I got these pinned together, and I'm going to pin it here for a little extra security. And we're just going to bring that elastic in, push it where it needs to go. And at this same time, I'm going to see if I can find a twist. So you can see here, all is bunched up because of the gathering, but it's also bunched because my elastic started to twist. It's actually twisting right here. So just straighten out your elastic. Find out wherever it's twisting and turning and doing all types of stuff. Okay. Now, where you place your gathers is completely up to you. You can just let the elastic do its thing and kind of gather it where it needs to be gathered. For me, I don't like a lot of gathers directly over my stomach on the front. That's just a personal preference for me. So the good thing about when you use elastic that's just comfortable and then you make it as small as you want, you kind of give your garment a little bit more freedom of where you want the gathers to be versus the elastic doing 100% of the gathers for you. So I can move, for instance, this is my front. I don't want a lot of gathers right here, like in the front, near my crotch and stuff. So I can actually move those out of the way. I still want a little bit of gathers because I like that look. Okay, so that way it's still gathered. My waistband, I mean, not waistband, my elastic is still there. The elastic is still gathering it up for me, but I'm the type where I just don't like gathers like boom right there. I'd rather it be flat here and then we start the gathers. So that's all I'm doing here, is just maneuvering my gathers a little bit. Then we'll flip it to the back. In the back, it can just be gathered. I don't have any preference. It can just be where it needs to be. And what you can do, and what I will do, is I'm going to tack my elastic in certain places around this casing, so that way it doesn't move. So that way I don't have to worry about redoing this every time I get, every time I wash the fabric, I wash the garment. Okay. So just double checking, because I thought I felt a twist. One moment. Now what you can do is try it on. That way you can see, can you maybe increase the, decrease the length of your elastic? Are you comfortable where it is? Do you want to adjust your gathers a little bit more? So before you do that, take out your pin so you don't stick yourself. So I'm going to try this on real quick, and then we'll see what we're working with. Okay, so we're trying it on, and exactly what I want it to do is what it's doing. It is flat here. The elastic is still there to give me some structure and stability, but my gathers don't start till on the side, right? And we got gathers in the back. This is what I wanted. So when you make yours, try it on before you do any final stitching, any final anything. Try it on and make sure the casing is where it needs to be and it looks how you want it to look. So we're just focusing on this part because we've already done tests and checks on the other parts. Okay, so if it's where you want it to be, we are going to attach our elastic together with a little box sew, and then we'll close up the casing, and that is it for today. All right? Okay, so I tried mine on. As you saw, I liked the way it was fitting. It was doing what it needed to do. So right now I've seen where my elastic twisted yet again. So I'm just trying to get it all the way right. And then I will start bar tacking it into places. And part of the reason why it is twisting is because I sewed inside of that seam allowance to give it more wiggle room, and I gave it a little too much wiggle room. But that's okay though, because we will bar tack it down throughout the casing so that I won't be doing this all the time. All right, so we take our safety pin out, and I just sew a box whenever I sew elastic together, like a box with the X in the middle. You can always just do like a lightning stitch. You can do, there are a couple different ways. I use the box because I just don't want it to, to come apart. And I know I put stress on my fabrics and on my garments, so I make sure that it's going to keep me secure. So I'll just sew this box with an X really quick. So I sew down, then I sew part of the X, then I sew back up. So that's part of my X. Then I sew back up. And then, all this fabric, I will sew back down at an angle, completing my X. So if you can see here, this is black on black. You ain't gonna be able to see this, but essentially it's a box and an X in the middle. All right, we'll clip our threads. Y'all, we are so close. We are so close to the end. I hope this week was a way for you to, oh, what is that phrase? Eat the elephant? Oh my gosh, y'all, I hope that's the right phrase. It's the phrase where it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Even though we don't eat elephant, but you get the gist of it. But that's how you tackle any sewing project. Like, even once you're done with this and you move on to whatever you're sewing next, you do it by taking it one step at a time, whether it's something you've completed or not. Take it one step at a time, one press at a time, one seam at a time. That's how every garment is made. So whether you are new to this, whether you're true to this, whether you're grew up in this, you know, whatever your stage is in sewing, you always do it one seam, one stitch at a time. All right, so we turn our outfit right sides out because we're going to close up that casing. Now, we've been using soft hands pretty much this whole project. This is where I ain't saying like manhandle your outfit, but you're definitely going to use more than soft hands because you're going to have to stretch your garment in order to close up that casing. So I'm just maintaining that same stitch line that I did around my elastic. Back stitch. And so you're just going to stretch your fabric to make sure it all stays, it's going to stay flat with one another. All right, and then we'll back stitch. We will cut those threads. All right, wherever the other thread is. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it was. Let's flip it right sides out. And you, my friends, have a completed outfit. Okay. Well, now all you have to do is put your tag on it if you're going to put a tag on it. Oh, and no, one more thing. We are going to, let's handle this elastic. Now, since my outfit is primarily black, I mean, it has, you know, different colors in it. But since it's primarily black, I'm going to pick spots within that casing where it's black. And all I'm going to do is about 2 or 3 stitches down, back stitch 2 or 3 stitches. That's going to be my bar tag. Mainly because I don't like hand sewing. And if I don't have to hand sew, I'm not going to hand sew. So, that's my way of bar tacking. So I'm just going to make sure, same thing I kind of did earlier before I tried it on. This is my front, and I don't like, you know, the front to be too gathered, but I also want my gathers kind of, you know, spaced out a little bit. So I'm just going to get it back to how I kind of had it before, where it's flat, probably about 2 inches on either side of my center front. And then we got some nice pretty gathers, and we're going to take this thread out though. Nice pretty gathers on either side here. And so what I'll do is, like this black piece right here, I'll sew a few stitches right here. That way is the front, the back, and the elastic are all together at that point. Then I'll probably do another one maybe right here. So then I know from here to here, if anything should happen, I only have to worry about getting that piece back together. And if you did the flounce, we did the same thing with the flounce. We attached it at the shoulder seams. So that way, if your elastic gets bunched up or whatever, you only have that little piece of space to fix versus trying to do the whole thing, right? Okay. So, I actually don't need these. So if your garment is another color, I would just find a spot that's not very telling. You know, it's not very open. Or you could always use the side seam and your center back seam. Those are excellent places to put these bar tacks, especially if you're using your machine. The side seam and center back, center front are great places to do that. If you're using, like if your thread is visible on your, is more visible on your fabric. So that's my flounce. Right here, you can't even see it. Like I only see it because I can see my threads. That way my elastic isn't going anywhere. And even afterwards, let's say, I don't know, for whatever reason, I decide I want to adjust my gathers a little bit more. I can still adjust them within these placed little bar tacks. And again, I don't even know if y'all can see it, but it's right here where these threads are. So it's a little bitty bar tack. I'm also going to do my side seam because with your side seam, there's a seam right there. So if you stitch in the ditch, you can sew up and down that whole thing. Side seam. I'm going to hide it somewhere in the back, but first I'm going to do my other side seam. That way I can make sure I evenly place my gathers. And again, kind of marking out where your gathers are is just a personal preference for me. You can just let the elastic do its thing and give you a different gather scheme, you know, a different gather method, or, you know, placement. That's what I'm thinking of. A new gather placement every time you put the outfit on. So I have my front done. Now on the back, I want to, that's my pocket. So on the back, I'm just really making sure that it's kind of evenly gathered. It's not like all the gathers are on my left butt cheek and then my right one's just like, hey, I want some gather love too. There we go. So I like that. Evenly. Sorry. I am awaiting a package. And I wanted to see if that was my package. Okay. So I will probably, since I bar tacked right here, this is my side seam. I'll probably bar tack somewhere around here, maybe within this black stripe that's here. And then I'll probably also do it like right around, probably this one right here. That way the back is secure as well. I think it was this one. And I'm just gonna shimmy over to the other side instead of taking it off. All right, this is my center back, so we'll say right here. Like I said, it's not an exact thing for this particular step. This is just something I'm doing. So it's not anything that has an exact science. It's just wherever you feel the elastic needs to be placed so it's comfortable for you. Okay. So this still allows the elastic to kind of do its thing within my guidelines. All right, let's cut our threads and we are done for today. If you're doing the romper version, we are done. So tomorrow we will talk about ironing and pressing. We are going to do a few styling, and lastly, we're going to do any catching up. So any catching up that you need to do is tomorrow, which is kind of why we made it a non-sewing day. It's just more to talk about the importance of ironing and pressing, talking about styling your make. Sarah made a solid color. I have this pattern. So seeing the two different ways, the multiple ways to style it, when you have a solid like hers or a pattern like mine, we hope will give you some inspiration on when you get ready to make yours and be out and about with your mask. All right. So I will see you all tomorrow.
Okay, hello and welcome to day 4 of our sew along. Thank you for joining us here at the Fab Clique, and we're sewing the Ellie and Max Summer Nights Romper or 2-piece. I'm doing a 2-piece, and so far we've covered the AO copy shop pattern and projector files in day 1, getting ready in day and cutting out our pattern, and then sewing the bodice, the top part, in day 2, sewing the pants and pockets in day 3, and in day 4 we're going to put it all together. Queenora will be putting her romper together, and I will be finishing up my pants by adding the yoga band at the top and also hemming my pants. And then tomorrow we'll talk about styling and ways to feel cute and make your outfit perfectly you. So let's get started with finishing up today. So I have my hemband here. The hemband actually comes in 1, but I made a mistake, and so I had to cut mine in 2. So when you do that, you just want to add like an extra 1/2 inch of seam allowance so that you can sew it together and you won't lose any of the inches. So what I'm going to do before I even get back to my pattern is to sew my hemband together to make it 1 piece. And I'm going to cut off 1/2 inch. I'm going to sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance because that was what I cut it as. So if you didn't have to do that, ignore this step. This is so I don't forget. Oh my goodness. Hands, if you could just cooperate, I would really appreciate it. Okay, let me pin it together. It doesn't want to just go in there by itself. It says, Sarah, could you please pin me? And so I'm going to be agreeable and do what my fabric is asking of me. This fabric is so soft, and I cannot wait to put it on as a full outfit. All right, get ready. Just remove that pin right away. I think I realized I just sewed it for 1/4 inch, but I think that was okay. It's fine. Ignore that. All right, so the next step that they want us to do is to turn the bottom raw edge of our pants 1/2 inch to the wrong side and press. And then we're going to sew to secure the hem. So you can choose if you want. Some people serge their hems and then sew them. And that's actually what I'm going to do. It just makes it look pretty on the inside. So I'm going to serge the bottom of my hems. And I'm just going to serge at 1/4 inch, and then I will still fold it up at 1/2 inch. This isn't a necessary step, I just like the way that it looks on the inside. With knit fabric, some people even choose to leave theirs raw because knit doesn't tend to fray most knit fabric. Alright, let's take it to the ironing board and I'll show you the hem step and then we'll come back. Alright, so sometimes I like to just iron out my hem before I start the hemming. And I have a gauge, a measuring gauge here. And I like to turn my pants inside out. I just did that in the most weird way possible. Why did I put it all through the leg? That's what happened. Alright. And then I can't find my hot hammer, which is awesome. You just, it's like a little piece of thing that you can use to measure. But I like to measure 1/2 inch. I'll turn it up 1/2 inch there. See? Double check that that's 1/2 inch. Go ahead, press. We're pressing it to the wrong side. Uh-oh. My hands are shaking pretty bad, but we're going to go ahead and press it. All right, just need one more piece here. a little tight. Cool. All right, let's go back to the sewing machine and pin. So the way that I was doing it actually didn't work, so I'm going to go ahead and I decided to do rolled hem instead. So to keep the same proportions, I just folded it over by 1/4 ish and then folded it over again, just because I wanted my raw edges hidden. And that's totally a preference, and when you're sewing your own clothes, you can do that. And then I'll take it to my machine, and since this doesn't need to kind of go away or go around anything, like just stretch, I don't need to use a stretch stitch. I'll be using a straight stitch. Come on, hand. Alright. Alright. So I take it to this machine. I love starting at the inner inseam just in case I mess up for some reason. Sometimes it likes to be fickle at the beginning. That's okay, it happens in the inseam. And now, let's add our hemband. Okay, and now it's time to add our yoga band. So we're going to put it right sides together. And sew at 1/4, and we're going to sew along the short edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now we're going to fold the yoga band down from the top to the bottom with the wrong sides touching. Very similar again to our sleeve. And before we get to the next step, what I like to do as a big bootied woman is to put, I'll try on my yoga pants, I'll try on the pants first and see about where they're going to hit. And then I actually like to insert some elastic into the top of the yoga band, and that helps. Where did I just put my elastic? For people who have problems with your pants falling down, if you insert some elastic inside the top of this part, and so what I'll do is I'll cut some that fits, and I'll just insert it right up here, and that will help my pants to stay up. So one moment and I'll be back with that. So I'm sewing my elastic, just turning it. I like to sew in a box. Oopsie, it's all wiggly wog. With an X, which helps me. It's a very ugly X. You know what? That's good. Oh, goodness. And then I insert it into, here's my little waistband. And I just wiggle it in there. So that it's up at the top. So it'll be in half. Some waistbands have a top and a bottom, and at that point I usually sew it to one of them. But that's not what happened here. might have made sense for me to sew it when I serged these sides together. That would have made sense, huh? It's a good idea for next time. Make sure that the seam is nice and flat. And then I'm going to pin it there because I'm going to stitch in the ditch just so it'll stay. So this is one of the things that you learn, you know, when you're sewing for yourself, like what your body needs. Sorry, I should probably do this up here so it can be seen. This is one of the things you learn when you're sewing for yourself, what your body needs and the best way to fit your body. I have learned that when I put elastic on the inside of pants like this, I just get a delicious fit and I feel much more comfortable. See it's up there? Ouch! Poke myself. And so now, I have two seams. You should have one seam if you know, cut it properly. But I have two seams, so I'm going to stitch in the ditch on both sides. Just so this doesn't move around, especially when I'm pinning it to my pants. Yeah. Stitching in the ditch just means you stitch in that little valley where two seams meet together. My son is trying to get my attention. Out there playing with a large stick. Oh, real life. He said, "Can I come in now?" No, you cannot. Not yet. Oh, that's funny. That's gonna be a nice tight one right there. Ouch. Oops. Didn't like that for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay. Alright, so I stitched in the ditch on both sides. And so this is not part of the pattern. Remember, this is how I am fitting my pants to make sure that I have a pant thing that doesn't roll down. Okay. Some people on one side will sew the whole waistband, but I'm not going to do that. And we'll see what happens, shall we? We will see what happens. All right. So now divide it in 4. I got these 2 edges, so that's going to be half of my 4. Put these 2 edges together, have them kiss, and then that means that the other pieces down here are my other edge. Make sure that you have both sides. There we go. Here's the other side. Now, y'all, I'm a home-taught sewist, so if I'm doing stuff wrong, it is what it is, okay? It is what it is. And then you want to divide your pants into 4 parts too. And we've done this already, right, with our top part. So I like to start with the middle. That's one, and then the middle center back is two. And don't assume that the sides are going to be exactly equidistant. You're going to find the middle. For me, it looks like it's a little bit toward the back a little bit. So oftentimes the back is a little bit longer than the front. So that's why that happens. And so when you're doing a neckline too, that's another trick to learn, is that it's not just you know, the center neck, center back, and then the sides, because they're not all equidistant. So now this is looking like, wait a minute, it's getting taken back. I'm actually looking at it. When I tried this on, it looks like my front might be a little big. I'm going to baste these on and then try them on. So before I serge it on and have to unpick that seam, I'm going to baste them on and see if that addresses that. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope so. And then this last pin will be right here. Right. So you're gonna sew, stretching your waistband to match your pants. And then so I'm gonna baste mine on, but use a stretch stitch or serger. Okay. All right. Here we go. Remember to make sure you're catching all your layers, and then when you go over your pocket, this is now attaching the pocket to everything together. But it shouldn't move because it was basted beforehand. Oopsie. Okay. Just making sure everything's nice and flat there. Ooh, I played bobbin chicken. I didn't realize I was doing that. Want to see how much I have left of my bobbin? This much. Can you see that? All right, I'm gonna go try it on and I'll be back.